This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. Your host, Harry Wilkinson. Yes, this is your host, Harry Wilkinson, and welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. This is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks, events, happenings in the news, happenings internationally, in the worlds of technology, in the worlds of science and health and religion, and we look at it all and we take a step back and we look at it from a higher perspective. We look at it from a spiritual perspective, if you will. If you don't like the word spiritual, you can think of it as a way of rising above what can often be stressful or button pushing or otherwise confusing, frightening, upsetting information. We're bombarded with it, right? I mean, everywhere you turn, we're bombarded with these things. And recent events, recent happenings, which we're, of course, going to talk about on the show, have highlighted just exactly how much we are bombarded by these kinds of incoming stressors, if you will. So it's important to have the skills, to have the tools, to be able to interact with these this bombardment, if you will, and to interact with it in a way that is healthy, that ensures your well-being, and gives you, a truthful way of understanding what's going on. So much of what is shown to us, so much of what this bombardment entails has to do with fear, and as I say, button pushing. And a lot of that is due to the kind of media and reporting that we have in this period of time, which is based on getting as many people to pay attention as possible. In other words, to get the largest audience as possible, so that you can get the largest ratings possible, so that you can charge advertising dollars that are substantial. And, of course, this is being done at the expense oftentimes of certainly truth and, accuracy, but also just at the expense of, our own personal sense of well-being. When you're bombarded with kinds of stories that are designed to frighten you, or, some people might not use the word frightened, to alert you, inform you, which to their minds is pretty much the same thing as scaring the bejesus out of you. When your main platform, your gatekeepers of information are, motivated by that, certainly that's detrimental to anybody's sense of well-being, and certainly can make you feel as if the world is falling apart, getting worse every day, that we're at the end of our existence, and this is why we have so much of this apocalyptic thinking going on. This is why we have this extreme thinking because of this bombardment, and we're going to talk about this extremism as I have titled this particular episode of our show. But the fact is that what I find to be healthy and helpful is taking that step back, is getting to that spiritual perspective, or that perspective of unity and oneness, of seeing that these situations, these stories that we are looking at, are creations. They are illusions. But I use that word cautiously because people misunderstand when I say illusions. They think I'm talking about things that are made up. And how could this be made up if it's really happening? If someone has lost their life, or destruction has happened. That's not what I mean by illusions. Maybe more appropriately are delusions. Illusions can certainly work in the world and have effects in the material world. But what I mean by illusions, and perhaps it's more even a better term to think of it as I've often said on the program, a hologram, that we at the highest level of our being, not our everyday mundane level, but at the highest level of our being, at our metaphysical expanded self, we are creating these situations. We create these holograms in which we participate, and we can experience these feelings of loss, fear, so on and so on. And as we experience them, it brings us to greater truth and understanding of who and what we really are. Because in order to participate in these illusions, in these or holograms, we have to forget who and what we really are for a time. We have to forget that we are expanded, unlimited, undestroyable, that we are divine mind, and that we are more than our bodies. We have to forget that, and we have to believe ourselves threatened. We have to believe ourselves weak. We have to believe ourselves in peril in order to play this game. And why do we want to play the game? Well, we play the game because, why do you play any game? It gives you a rush. It gives you a sensation. It gives you an experience of things that are, illusions in and of themselves. They're not real, but they feel real, and the effects they have on us, and ultimately the truth that they bestow upon us, that's the reality. If you could use a sports analogy for that. You're in the middle, you're playing a sports game. You know the rules. You have to play by those rules, even though they may seem arbitrary, and they are, basically. You play by those rules. And what you experience from playing by those rules and what you get involved in is an all-encompassing sort of experience that makes you feel a certain way, makes you learn certain things, but it's not the truth. It's not the truth of who and what you are. You could use a theater analogy. Actors, when they are portraying a role on stage or in film, particularly certain styles of acting, like method actors, you lose yourself, or you should lose yourself in the role that you're playing. You forget who you are. You forget you are so and so, and you become this character. That's who you are for that time. Now, in the back of your mind, there's still an understanding, an awareness that this is a role, that this is something, this is not who you are. But you lose sight of it. You forget about it as you indulge and engage in being this role. And that's how it works for us. So I want to look at these three events that have happened since the last time I was on the air. And I want to look at their common denominator, which is extremism. And I want to talk about its relationship to what I call the transition era. And if you've listened to the program before, you know that I'm focusing on this time that we're living in as being a transition era, an era in which we have come through or planted the seeds of tremendous social change and upheaval. And during this transition era, there are a lot of things happening as we move forward. Some might think of it as, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. But there's a level of uncertainty in a transition era because things are changing. And unless you keep your focus on the goal of where you're going, the changes during this transition era can make things feel very unstable. And that gives way to feelings of fear, and that creates the extremism. So this extremism takes numerous forms. It can take the form of needing to hold on to past ideas so desperately, so strongly, that you are willing to do whatever it takes to ensure that those ways do not leave you. So rather than embrace any changes, you are desperately holding on to non-change, if you will. That's one form it can take. Another form it takes is adherence in a blind way and in a very literal way to a philosophy, a thought pattern, a thought system. And religion is included in this, a religion, to the exclusion of all else, and really to, a rather warped understanding of it, but an adherence to an ideology of some kind that makes sense of the world for you and others of your group, or who share your thought system, your ideology, your belief system. And when things become transitional, you hold on to the only thing you think makes sense of the world for you. And then another way that extremism manifests itself is in the sense of impending doom. This idea, and I mentioned that, our sort of environment of bombardment often triggers this sort of idea of doom, this apocalyptic mindset. But if you have a feeling of impending doom, then you will do things you've never done before. You will do things in an extreme way. You will push yourself and others to points you've never been to before because you don't know if you're going to ever be able to do anything like that again. Um, so these are the ways that this extremism, um, presents itself in our world, in our transition era. And extremism isn't just limited to these disastrous things, which, again, we'll talk about. I'm not avoiding it, but I'm delaying talking about these things because you've heard enough of them. And while my perspective is going to be different, um, perhaps taking a different route towards it is more helpful. Anyway, it's not limited to these, events of terrorism and, shootings, mass shootings, and these sorts of things. There's an extremist element in our everyday world. We have things we call extreme sports on television now, right? Where people do the most outrageous, physical stunts, if you will, for no particular reason other than just to push yourself to the point where, you do these remarkable things and you get some attention, you get on television. We've got reality television shows where people strip themselves naked and, eat bugs and do, survival type things. It all comes out of this sense of impending, apocalyptic doom. We see it in our movies. Some of the most popular movies and television shows have to do with the end of the world or people fighting against the end of the world. All of the superhero movies are about, these larger than life heroes battling larger than life forces to save the world. It's very much on our minds, apparently. And so this is what we can take with us, when we look at and understand where this extremism is coming from and how to deal with it. So first, let's go back to the first event. Not the first event, but the first of the chronologically the three that I want to talk about, which is the events that happened in France. And people were shocked when it happened. I don't know if you can remember 2 weeks ago because so much has happened. But if you remember, people thought, this was, the most shocking thing they'd ever seen. This well-coordinated, well-planned attack, based on, extremist ideology. And the reaction that has occurred. You see, extremism begets extremism in many cases. And what is to be commended in some ways is particularly, in the U.S. President Barack Obama's response to this is what's to be commended about that is the calmness. Unfortunately, however, even though there is There has been, you know, not a knee-jerk reaction to this. The reaction to it is still more violence, to send planes and bombing, which is, well, number one, just from a, political, very materialistic perspective, it's exactly what ISIS wants, which is to drag more people into their apocalyptic world by having more countries come in and bomb them. They can, they can further reinforce their own belief in the despotism of these countries and how they are out to get them. And then they can more fully justify their own attacks. Attack begets attack. And as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, an attack on one is essentially attack upon yourself. So what do we do about that? What do we do about those sorts of attacks? And how do we avoid the pitfalls of extremism begetting extremism? Well, we'll talk about that, but let's look at the other two incidents that go along with this. Chronologically, the next thing was a shooting that happened at a Planned Parenthood clinic, in which people lost their lives to. And this was, again, a well-planned, well-orchestrated, extremist event. However, the ideology had nothing to do with ISIS. It had to do with Christian ideology and a belief in the evil of abortion. Abortion, to the mind of this gentleman and many others who don't actually pick up guns and blow people away, but certainly attack with their minds and their words, which from a spiritual perspective is the same thing. The belief that abortion is evil justifies anything that you do in response to that. So we had that situation, and then, of course, latest in San Bernardino, where you had, again, a well-coordinated, well-planned, although there were some surprises, apparently, in that particular scenario. An argument at a party that went awry and led to the attack that happened. And it's still debatable as to whether that might have been a staged event or whether it just was an unplanned or unexpected trigger of the event. That's the thing. When you meet violence with violence, or any act of violence, no matter what your intention is, you always have unintended consequences. You never know what it's going to end up doing, what the blowback, as they say, will be. So how do you deal with attacks of this nature? How do you deal with the kind of extremism that we are going to continue to experience in this transition era that we are in? Well, there's two things. Rather than reacting no matter how stressful the situation is, it must be met with calm. And calm means not sending bombs. Calm means not shutting down cities, towns, closing off borders. That's not calm. That's contained panic. And it's what those who commit these acts thrive on, because it continues to fuel their anger and their sense of self-righteousness. You see, in extremism, things are either evil, of the devil, or good, and from God. And there's no in between. And so when we engage in rhetoric that is the same as theirs, when we call Muslims, now there are those who are calling Muslim itself an evil religion, but we won't even go there. But even if you call the people who commit these terrible acts evil, you are engaging in the same sort of extremism, which will again result in, ultimately, in attack. Because calling someone or something evil is an attack. These people don't do these things because they believe they are evil, or because they believe themselves to be involved and enjoying and embracing evil. That's not what anyone does. No one commits an act or does something because they think it's evil. They do something because they think it's justified, because they think it's the right thing to do, because they think it's going to get them somewhere and solve a problem of some kind. And from their mind, those who oppose them are evil. And so you get nowhere with that kind of perspective, that kind of rhetoric. From the perspective of oneness, when you see that part of yourself, that person, that terrorist or whoever that may be, or group, attacking, doing these horrible things that you find disturbing, you meet it with calm, and you stop the attack. You stop the attack in the best way possible without attacking yourself. And here's the reason you stop the attack. Not because you're afraid that people are going to get hurt. Not because you're afraid that you're going to die. You're afraid for yourself or even your family or loved ones. You stop the attack because you realize the other person or the other group is hurting themselves. Since we are not our bodies, and our bodies are illusions, we can't really be hurt. But in the rules of the game that we're playing, in the rules of the hologram that we're engaging in, that happens. So to play according to that game, then we have to make sure that we stop the attack, but we stop it with compassion. And we stop it from the perspective of understanding we are stopping ourselves from trying to hurt ourselves. I know that's a little convoluted, but in the transition era, that's something that we are realizing, because we are realizing our connectedness to each other in very concrete ways. It's no longer some airy-fairy philosophy or some mystical mumbo-jumbo. It's more and more tangible to people. And as it gets more and more tangible to people, points of view, ways of managing, and, waging war or waging peace will be informed by that knowledge. And so that is my take on the extremism and why we have it in this transition era. And I didn't get to my wellness portion, unfortunately, of the show. We were going to talk about managing stress, which is something that we all need to understand about, not only with these stories, but with just what's going on with, holiday time and all of that. And also some very handy tips on dealing with congestion, which is something I've been battling the past couple of weeks. And I have some interesting notes to share about how you can do that. But unfortunately, I think it's going to have to wait until next week, when I will devote more time to the wellness portion of our program. I hear you. I get the feedback from those of you who have listened and wonder where the wellness is, in the Spirit and Wellness show. Well, it's there, and we'll do more practical, concrete wellness ideas next week. But part of wellness is the ability to deal with these stressful situations, these stressful world events in a way that keeps you healthy and sane. So keep healthy and sane until next week, and have a wonderful